Some people fill every silence before it arrives. They scroll through contacts at midnight, text anyone who might still be awake, plan tomorrow's interactions before today has ended. This isn't about being social. This is about survival. If you enjoy deep psychological insights, feel free to subscribe. Let's explore this more deeply. There is a specific kind of panic that arrives the moment you realize you have nowhere to be and no one expecting you. It doesn't announce itself with words. It starts in your chest, a tightness that spreads through your ribs like cold water filling a space you didn't know was empty. Your hand reaches for your phone before you've consciously decided to move. You scroll through messages, through social media feeds, through anything that proves other people exist and are thinking and living and breathing somewhere beyond the walls of your room. And for a moment, the panic subsides. But only for a moment. This is what it feels like to be someone who cannot be alone. Not someone who prefers company, not someone who enjoys conversation and connection. Those are natural human desires. This is different. This is the person who experiences solitude as a physical threat, whose nervous system registers an empty evening the way others register danger. Who will say yes to plans they don't want, stay in conversations that drain them, accept company from people they don't even like, simply because the alternative, silence, stillness, the sound of their own breathing in an empty room, is unbearable. You know this feeling if you've ever cancelled plans at the last minute only to immediately panic about what you'll do instead. If you've ever laid in bed at 2 a.m. scrolling through old text conversations, considering reaching out to people you haven't spoken to in months, maybe years, just to feel that someone, somewhere, knows you're awake. If you've ever felt your heart race when a friend says they need to reschedule, not because you were particularly excited about the plans, but because now there's a gap, an empty space, hours you'll have to fill with yourself. And here's what most people don't understand. You're not afraid of being physically alone. You're afraid of what happens when there's no one there to distract you from yourself. When there's no performance to give, no role to play, no one watching who needs you to be funny or helpful or interesting or kind. Because in those moments, when the noise stops and the stimulation ends and the validation disappears, something rises to the surface. Something you've been running from, a feeling you can't name, a question you don't want to answer, a void that no amount of conversation or connection ever seems to fill. Perhaps you've noticed that even when you're surrounded by people, you still feel empty, that you can be at a party, in a relationship, part of a group, and still experience that same hollow sensation, like you're watching yourself from outside, performing a version of connection while something inside remains untouched, unreached, unknown. The paradox is devastating. Constantly with others, perpetually lonely. And the more you seek external presence to solve internal absence, the worse it becomes. This isn't about introversion or extroversion. This isn't a personality preference. This is about dependency. About a psychological pattern so deeply embedded that you may not even recognize it as a pattern. You think this is just who you are, someone who needs people, who thrives on connection, who feels energized by company. But underneath that comfortable narrative lies something darker. A fear so primitive that your entire life has organized itself around avoiding a single experience, meeting yourself in silence. What are you running from when you cannot sit with yourself? What happens in your mind when solitude becomes unbearable? But what is this really about? What happens in the mind when silence transforms from peaceful to terrifying, when your own company becomes the one thing you'll do anything to escape? Let's go deeper into this. The human mind is extraordinarily skilled at protecting itself from pain. When solitude becomes unbearable, it's not because being alone is inherently dangerous. It's because solitude functions as a mirror, and what that mirror reflects is something the conscious mind has learned to avoid at all costs. In the absence of external stimulation, in the quiet moments when there's no one to talk to and nothing to distract you, your internal world becomes impossible to ignore. And for someone who cannot be alone, that internal world contains something they are not ready to face. This is where the psychological mechanism reveals itself. Constant social connection isn't just a preference, it's an anesthetic. It's a way of numbing yourself to feelings, thoughts, and questions that only emerge in stillness. When you're texting, calling, scrolling, planning, engaging, there's no space for those questions to surface. Your attention is externally focused. Your identity is constructed through interaction. You exist in relation to others. And as long as that relation continues, you don't have to confront what exists when the relation stops. Psychologists who study emotional regulation have identified this pattern: the use of external stimulation to avoid internal discomfort. It's not that different from any other form of avoidance: substance use, workaholism, constant busyness. The mechanism is the same. Fill the space so nothing uncomfortable can enter it. Keep moving so you don't have to feel what's waiting in the stillness. And for someone who cannot be alone, other people become that filling, that movement, that constant distraction from self. But here's what makes this particularly insidious: enjoying company is healthy and normal. Seeking connection is a fundamental human need. So the person caught in this pattern can easily mistake their compulsion for preference. They tell themselves they're just social, just extroverted, just someone who loves people. And on the surface, that explanation holds. But there's a difference between wanting company and needing constant presence, between choosing to be with others and being unable to function without them. That difference shows itself in the panic. When plans fall through and you feel your chest tighten, when the thought of a weekend alone fills you with dread, when you find yourself texting multiple people just to see who responds first, that's not preference. That's dependency. And dependency always points to something beneath the surface, something you're managing through the constant presence of others. What happens in those rare moments when you're forced into solitude? Pay attention to the internal dialogue. Notice how quickly your mind begins generating reasons to reach out, excuses to make contact, justifications for interrupting someone else's day just so you don't have to sit with yourself. Notice the discomfort that rises, not boredom, but something deeper, an unease that feels almost physical. A restlessness that no activity seems to satisfy, because the issue isn't that you need something to do. The issue is that you need someone to be. This is where identity begins to fragment. When your sense of self depends on external validation, on being seen and heard and responded to, you start to lose touch with who you are in the absence of an audience. You become skilled at reading what others want from you, at adapting to different social contexts, at performing versions of yourself that keep people engaged. And in the process, the authentic self, the one that exists independent of performance, gets buried so deeply that you forget it's there. The exhaustion you feel isn't from being social. It's from maintaining this constant state of connection, this perpetual performance, this endless monitoring of how you're being perceived. Your nervous system never fully relaxes because there's always someone to respond to, always a relationship to maintain, always the possibility that if you're not available, not responsive, not present, something will be lost. But this goes deeper than habit. There is a wound beneath this behavior, one that was created long before you knew what loneliness meant. And understanding where it comes from changes everything. This pattern didn't begin in adulthood. It began in childhood, in the earliest relationships you had, before you had words for what you were experiencing. Developmental psychology shows us that how we relate to solitude as adults is directly shaped by how we experienced presence and absence as children. And for someone who cannot be alone, something happened in those early years that taught them a devastating lesson, that their worth, their safety, their very existence depended on someone else being there. Think about the child who learned that attention was unpredictable, the parent who was sometimes warm and available, other times distant and preoccupied. The child in that environment doesn't learn to trust that connection will be there when they need it. Instead, they learn to desperately seek it, to hold on to it, to panic when it disappears. Because if love and attention come and go without pattern or reason, the child believes they must do something to secure it. They must be good enough, entertaining enough, useful enough to make someone stay. This is where anxious attachment forms, not through dramatic trauma, but through inconsistency, through the quiet fear that builds in a child who doesn't know if their needs will be met. Who learns that being alone means being forgotten, that silence means abandonment. The nervous system of this child develops in a state of hypervigilance, always scanning for signs that connection is slipping away, always ready to do whatever it takes to pull it back. Or consider the child who experienced emotional neglect. Not abuse, not obvious mistreatment, just the absence of emotional presence. The parent who was physically there but emotionally unavailable, who didn't ask questions, didn't notice feelings, didn't create space for the child's internal world to matter. That child learns something even more painful, that who they are on the inside doesn't count, that they only have value when they're useful, when they're performing, when they're giving something to someone else. Being alone in this context means being invisible, and invisibility feels like death. These children grow into adults who carry a core belief they may never articulate. I am not enough on my own. My value exists only in relation to others. If no one is paying attention to me, I cease to matter. And that belief shapes everything. It shapes how they enter relationships, how they make decisions, how they spend their time. It shapes the panic they feel when plans fall through, the desperation they feel when someone doesn't text back, the emptiness they feel even when surrounded by people. Because here's what happens. The adult is still running the same program the child created for survival. The child who learned that solitude meant danger, that attention meant safety, that being alone was something to fear. And so the adult fills every gap, accepts every invitation, maintains every connection, no matter how draining or hollow. Because the alternative triggers that old terror, the terror of being left, of not mattering, of disappearing into silence and having no one notice. You can see this pattern playing out in specific ways. The adult who texts multiple people with the same question, waiting to see who responds first. The person who stays in relationships that have long stopped working because being with the wrong person still feels safer than being with no one. The individual who calls themselves social and extroverted when what they really are is terrified. Terrified of the quiet, terrified of their own company, terrified of what they might discover about themselves if they ever stopped running. The nervous system remembers what the mind has forgotten. It remembers the feeling of waiting for someone to come back, of sitting in silence wondering if you did something wrong, of needing comfort and finding emptiness instead. And now, decades later, that same nervous system reacts to solitude as if it were the original threat, as if being alone now is the same as being abandoned then. And here is where it becomes dangerous. Because this pattern doesn't just shape how you spend your time, it shapes who you become, what you tolerate, and how others use you. Are you ready to see the cost? The cost of never being able to sit with yourself is not immediately visible. It accumulates slowly, in choices you don't recognize as choices, in parts of yourself you lose without noticing they're gone. And the most devastating part is that you've been told this is normal, that needing people is healthy, that avoiding loneliness is self-care. But there's a difference between connection and dependency. And that difference shows itself in what you've sacrificed without ever meaning to. Start with self-knowledge. When you cannot be alone, you never develop the ability to know yourself outside of how others perceive you. Your opinions become echoes of the last person you spoke to. Your preferences shift depending on whose company you're in. You don't know what you actually enjoy because you've never had the space to discover it without external influence. Every decision requires validation. What should I eat? Let me ask someone. What should I watch? Let me see what others recommend. What do I think about this? Let me gauge the room first, see what's acceptable, what gets approval, what keeps people engaged. This is identity diffusion, the psychological term for having no stable sense of self. You've become a collection of performances, a series of adaptations to different audiences. With this friend, you're funny. With that group, you're agreeable. In this relationship, you're the helper. At work, you're the accommodating one. But strip away all those contexts, remove all those witnesses, and who remains? You don't know, because you've never spent enough time in your own presence to find out. And this makes you incredibly vulnerable to manipulation. People who understand power dynamics can sense dependency the way predators sense fear. They recognize when someone needs constant validation, when someone will tolerate mistreatment to avoid abandonment, when someone values any connection over no connection. Narcissists, manipulators, emotional parasites, they don't target the strong and self-contained. They target people who cannot be alone. Because those people are controllable, their need makes them predictable, their fear makes them manageable. So you find yourself in relationships where you're disrespected, where your boundaries are constantly crossed, where you give and receive nothing but the bare minimum presence that keeps you from leaving. You tell yourself it's complicated, that all relationships require compromise, that you're being patient and understanding. But the truth is simpler and more painful. You're accepting treatment you know is wrong because the alternative, being alone, is something your nervous system has categorized as existential threat. Better to be with someone who hurts you than to be with no one at all. The exhaustion is constant, but you can't name its source. You're always available, always responsive, always saying yes when you want to say no, always showing up when you need to rest. You've become the Sinindis person everyone calls when they need something because you've trained them to expect your immediate presence. And you resent it, quietly, in ways you don't fully acknowledge. You resent the friends who only reach out when they need support. You resent the partners who know you'll never leave. You resent yourself for being unable to stop performing, unable to disappoint anyone, unable to prioritize your own needs over someone else's desire for your attention. But there's something even more insidious happening. Your life stops being yours. Career decisions get made based on where your friends are, where your partner wants to be, where you can guarantee you won't end up isolated. You turn down opportunities that would require temporary solitude, the job in another city, the program that demands focused independent work, the dream that would mean months of being alone with your own thoughts and efforts. You tell yourself you're choosing connection over ambition, relationships over career, people over things, but you're not choosing. You're surrendering to a fear you won't acknowledge. And here's the cruelest part. Despite all of this, despite being constantly surrounded by people, despite never having an empty calendar or a quiet weekend, you still feel profoundly alone. Because the cruelest part isn't that others take advantage of this need. It's what you've convinced yourself this pattern means about who you are. The mind is extraordinarily skilled at protecting the ego from truths it cannot yet handle. And so it creates narratives, stories that transform weakness into virtue, fear into personality, dysfunction into identity. If you cannot be alone, you have likely told yourself a series of lies so convincing that you believe them completely. These lies aren't malicious. They're survival mechanisms. But they keep you trapped in a pattern that is slowly destroying you from the inside. The first lie sounds like this: I'm just a social person. I'm extroverted. I love being around people. This narrative allows you to rebrand dependency as personality trait to make your compulsion sound healthy and normal. And on the surface, it holds. You do enjoy company. You do feel energized by interaction. But there's a question you're avoiding. What happens when the company ends? Because if you were genuinely social by preference, solitude would be neutral. Maybe not your favorite state, but tolerable, peaceful even. Instead, it triggers panic. And panic isn't preference. It's pathology. Notice how you never choose solitude, how you fill every gap before it forms, how the thought of a weekend alone doesn't sound restful, it sounds terrifying. That's not extroversion. That's avoidance disguised as social preference. And the more you tell yourself this story, the less you have to confront what you're actually running from. The second lie is softer, more insidious. I'm just a good friend. I'm loyal. I'm caring. I'm there for people. You've convinced yourself that your constant availability is generosity, that your inability to say no is compassion, that your desperate need to be needed is love. But watch what happens beneath the surface. You don't help because you genuinely want to. You help because if you're indispensable, people can't leave. You give not from abundance, but from terror. Every act of service is a transaction. I'll be whatever you need me to be, just don't abandon me. This is performative empathy, and it's exhausting. You listen to problems you don't have energy for. You show up to events you'd rather skip. You support people who never support you back. And you tell yourself, this is what good people do. That relationships require sacrifice. That caring means self-abandonment. But the truth is darker. You've confused being used with being loved. And as long as you maintain this narrative, you never have to face the fact that your giving isn't generous. It's desperate. The third lie whispers, I don't like being alone. That's normal. Everyone prefers company. And yes, humans are social creatures. Connection is a fundamental need. But there's a vast difference between preferring company and experiencing solitude as a threat response. When plans fall through and your heart races, when an empty evening makes you scroll through contacts looking for anyone who might be available, when silence triggers the same physiological response as danger, that's not normal preference. That's your nervous system treating aloneness as emergency. But you minimize it. You tell yourself everyone feels this way, that no one really enjoys being alone, that your constant need for external presence is just human nature. And in doing so, you avoid the harder question, why does solitude feel like abandonment? What are you so afraid of discovering in the quiet? The fourth lie is perhaps the most devastating. They need me. You've convinced yourself that others depend on your constant presence, that if you weren't always available, something terrible would happen, that your role is to be the helper, the supporter, the one who shows up. This is projection at its finest. You need them, desperately, but acknowledging that need feels too vulnerable. So you reverse it. You create crises where none exist. You insert yourself into problems that aren't yours to solve. You make yourself necessary because if they need you, you have a reason to stay connected. But what if I told you this isn't a flaw? What if this pattern is trying to tell you something crucial? Something about a need that was never met? And what if understanding this is the first step toward freedom? The truth you need to hear is this: you cannot fix this by finding the right person, joining the right group, or filling your calendar with enough activity. The problem isn't external. It never was. The issue is your relationship with yourself, and no amount of external presence will repair what's broken internally. This is difficult to accept, because it means the solution requires the one thing you've been avoiding: spending time alone with yourself. Sitting in the discomfort you've been running from for years, maybe decades. And there's no shortcut through this. Change begins with conscious recognition. You have to stop calling this a personality preference and name it for what it is: fear. Not in a self-blaming way, but with clear-eyed honesty. Notice the panic when plans dissolve. Observe how your hand moves toward your phone when you're idle, how you compulsively check messages, how you feel genuine distress when no one has texted you in a few hours. Stop explaining these behaviors away. Just see them. Awareness without judgment. That's the first step. You can't change a pattern you won't acknowledge exists. Then comes the harder part: gradual exposure to the thing you've been avoiding. Start small. 15 minutes of intentional solitude, not meditation, not productivity, not doing anything that has a purpose or outcome, just sitting. No phone, no music, no podcast filling the silence, just you and the quiet. And when the discomfort rises, and it will rise, don't run from it. Don't reach for distraction. Sit with it. Feel it move through your body. Notice where it lives in your chest, your throat, your stomach. This discomfort is old pain finally being allowed to surface. It feels unbearable because you've been avoiding it for so long, but it won't kill you. It just wants to be witnessed. As you sit in this space, begin asking yourself questions that you've never allowed room for. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I actually want, separate from what others want from me? What feelings am I avoiding by staying constantly connected? These aren't rhetorical questions, they're invitations to genuine self-discovery. And the answers won't come immediately. They emerge slowly, in fragments. As you build the capacity to be with yourself without needing to perform or explain or justify your existence to anyone. This process requires you to develop something you've never had, the ability to self-soothe, to regulate your own nervous system without using other people as emotional life support. When the panic comes, instead of immediately reaching out to someone, pause, breathe, remind yourself that you can survive your own company, that being alone is not the same as being abandoned, that you are not the child anymore waiting for someone to return. You are the adult who can choose to stay present with yourself even when it's uncomfortable. Slowly, something begins to shift. You start noticing your own preferences, what you actually enjoy, watching, eating, thinking about when there's no one to influence you. You discover opinions that are genuinely yours, not borrowed from whoever spoke most recently. You find that you have an internal world that's been waiting for your attention, rich and complex, and entirely your own. This is the emergence of authentic self, the person who exists independent of audience or validation. But this won't be comfortable, and you need to know that going in, isolation will feel like death when you've avoided it for years. The discomfort will be intense. Your relationships will shift when you stop being available at all times, when you start setting boundaries, when you choose solitude over obligation. Some people will leave, those who were using your constant availability, who depended on your inability to say no, who valued you for what you gave rather than who you are. They'll disappear. And this is not easy. There's no shortcut. Those who leave were using your need against you. The discomfort is old pain finally being processed. Solitude reveals what connection has been masking. Freedom requires this passage through emptiness. And this brings us to the final truth, the one that changes how you see everything. Because once you understand this, you realize that the fear of being alone was never about other people at all. The person you've been avoiding in the silence isn't some terrifying stranger, it's you. The real you, the one who got buried under years of performance and accommodation and desperate attempts to be enough for others. The fear of being alone was never actually about solitude. It was about finally meeting yourself without the protective buffer of external validation, without the distraction of constant connection, without the armor of being needed. And what you'll discover, if you have the courage to sit in that silence, is that the emptiness you feared isn't empty at all. This is the ultimate revelation. The internal void you've been running from doesn't actually exist. What you interpreted as emptiness was actually fullness you've never accessed. A rich internal world that constant distraction has kept you from experiencing. Thoughts that are entirely your own. Feelings that don't need to be performed or explained, a version of yourself that exists independent of anyone's opinion or presence. This person has been waiting for you in the quiet for years, maybe your entire life. The mind creates the illusion of emptiness to protect you from pain. It tells you that solitude means abandonment, that silence equals worthlessness, that if no one is watching, you cease to exist. But these are stories constructed by a frightened child who didn't understand that being alone and being abandoned are fundamentally different experiences. The child needed others for survival. You don't, not anymore. And recognizing this distinction changes everything. What you thought was a void is actually the most intimate relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. And like any relationship, it requires time, attention, presence. You can't know someone you never spend time with. You can't trust someone you constantly avoid. You can't love someone whose company you find unbearable. For years, you've treated yourself this way, avoided your own presence, filled every moment so you wouldn't have to be with yourself, and then wondered why you felt so profoundly alone even when surrounded by people. The transformation isn't dramatic, it's subtle. It begins the first time you sit in silence and don't immediately reach for your phone. The first time you decline plans without feeling guilt or panic. The first time you realize you're choosing to be alone, not because you have to, but because you want to. Because your own company has become something valuable rather than something to escape. This shift from needing people to feel whole to being whole and choosing to share that wholeness with others is the difference between dependency and freedom. And everything changes from this foundation. You stop tolerating mistreatment because being alone is no longer worse than being disrespected. Your presence becomes valuable because it's no longer constantly available. You're not responding to every text immediately, not saying yes to every invitation, not abandoning your own needs to accommodate someone else's desires. Connections deepen because they're based on genuine desire rather than desperate need. You become someone others want to be around because you're grounded in yourself, because you're not using them to fill an internal void, because your relationship with them is choice rather than survival mechanism. Here's the paradox that will redefine your life. Only when you can be truly alone do you become capable of meaningful connection. The fear of solitude was actually protecting you from your own power. What looked like weakness, the constant need for others, was masking your refusal to claim your own strength, and that strength has been there all along, waiting for you to stop running long enough to recognize it. Look at your life right now. How many of your choices are made from fear of being alone? How many relationships exist only because you couldn't face yourself? How much of who you are is performance, and how much is truth? Tonight, try something. Turn off the phone. Sit in silence, not to meditate or be productive, just to be. Notice what happens. Notice the panic. Notice the urge to reach out. Notice what arises when there's no one to perform for. Because that discomfort, that's the doorway. The psychology of people who cannot be alone reveals something profound, that the fear of solitude is often fear of self-knowledge. And self-knowledge, though uncomfortable, is the only path to genuine freedom. Take a moment to notice where these patterns appear in your own life. Awareness is the first step toward understanding. What should we explore next in the psychology of human behavior? Drop your ideas below. If you enjoyed this video, Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated. The weak seek constant company. The strong tolerate solitude. The wise choose when they need each other and when they need themselves.